you for coming. Please feel free to...
This meeting is being recorded.
Please feel free to raise your hand if you have something to say, and send in any question if you feel like you have a question to ask. And because of time, I'll go right away to introducing the session. Our session for that day, our topic today is about data as a competitive advantage for startups. And I'm going to introduce our speaker for that day. Our speaker is Mackinon Kabarole. He's a strategic management practitioner with proven leadership, track record, and hands-on experience in business planning, customer analytics, pricing, customer experience, business process optimization, and project management. You're very welcome to this session, Mackinon. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Melanie. Thanks for the kind introduction.
Okay. Maybe you can say something to the people before we dive into the questions.
Okay, thanks to our participants who have joined. I'm looking forward to an engagement where we can share views and hopefully learn from each other.
Okay. So our first question is, what 5 words ably suits the character of Mackinon Kabarole? Am I pronouncing it right though?
Yes, it's you're spot on. So I would probably say humble, friendly, logical, and confident.
Friendly. Have you made any friend today?
I hope by the end of the day I'll have, since Melanie is a good name, hopefully I'll make a good friend in my interviewer.
Okay. What has your career journey been like?
So it's been an eventful decade and some years. So I started my career in customer experience, in banking. It was Barclays at the time, 2018. I hope you were born, Melanie, by then.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, so 2018, I was supporting the electronic banking customers of the bank. I later moved after a year to Orange. Then they were New Telecom at the time, where I also went ahead to support their data customers for about a year. I was promoted to a supervisor for the data support team, and eventually promoted to a role of workforce planner, where I was introduced to data analytics, planning, process optimization, and the things related to customer experience. And that was between 2019 and 2011. Then 2011, I joined a technical team within the same company, Orange, to do project management and for their ISP or corporate customers. So that was my journey in Orange. I was then eventually promoted to product manager, also in charge of business intelligence. That's a position I held for 2 years before I joined MTN in the business analytics section of marketing. So I've grown from different companies, different roles, to a role that I am today as a senior manager in the business intelligence division. So I can say it's been an eventful career, but also rewarding.
That is very interesting to know how you've grown from one position to the other. I actually had something that I've not heard of before, process optimization, but we can talk about that some other time.
Okay.
So what is the most simplistic definition you can give for the word data?
So I don't know if it will be simplistic, but data is simply information in its raw form, not processed, not organized, or not structured in any way to give meaning. So in the typical sense, really for as long as there's information, not intentionally organized, structured, or put in a way that gives meaning, then that's data. So that would be
Okay.
the simplistic way to put it for me.
Okay. Data is information in its raw form. Wow.
Correct.
We commonly catch the clinch that data is the new oil, stroke gold. But what is
Okay.
data in the business perspective?
So in the business perspective, really, any information you collect while performing business transactions, or while you're interfacing with your customers and engaging them, or your vendors, suppliers, um, that would be really data in itself. So any interaction at any given point, either between you as a business with your customers, or your customers with you, or you with your agents, suppliers, or vendors, at all each of those interactions, you're collecting information which could constitute data in the business perspective.
Okay. I don't know if the other people are with us. I don't know if they are at par with us. I'll just check if we have anything in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds like we are together for now. To the attendees, please feel free to ask any question if you have something to say so that you're not left behind in this learning process. Okay, I'll go on to the next question. This one should be a good one because I'm working with a startup, so I'm very interested to know.
Okay.
Yeah. So how can a startup leverage data to compete against already existing businesses that have more capital and human resource?
Okay, that's an interesting one, Melanie. So if I'll give my humble view, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. So my humble view is that a startup does not need to compete with the big businesses with more capital and human resource. You would be setting yourself up for the proverbial David versus Goliath fight, because your everything would be stacked against you in the sense. So, but my view is the startup in its nature usually will identify pockets of underserved customer segments within a given market and then provide a
Pardon?
niche. So in the startup by their nature will really identify some pockets of customers that are underserved by the big players, or
Okay.
have a niche need that is typically not going to be served by a large corporation, which will not have the focus on those segments. So in a way, while you're competing with them, but by the nature of how you're targeting your customers, it is difficult for them to compete against you. So for me, it's in a way of identifying those niche needs that a large corporation would not be able to focus on, and providing them a differentiated kind of offering, service, or product that would be either too costly for a big company, or it would change its focus that they wouldn't be willing to do it. I could give an example. So I don't know, you could probably guide me on what kind of startup you do, but let me give an example today of Jumia. Let's say Jumia is a big company that does online orders for food and other items. So if, for
Okay.
instance, you as Melanie identified that in the place where you live, there are 18 apartments where each of those people have unique shopping needs. Yeah,
Yes.
you can create a product that's unique for only those 18 that Jumia would not be able
Mm,
to replace and would not even have the focus to know that there exists that special need of those 18 people. So that's why I started by saying I don't think you would need to beat the big one, but you can identify opportunities where it would be difficult for them to compete directly with you. I don't know if
okay.
I've answered you ably there.
Yes, you have. So you asked me to give the context of our startup. So we
Yes.
deal in producing products, clean cooking energy products that are
Okay.
accessible to all. And those
Okay.
products include, our first product is an electric pressure cooker.
Okay.
And now, so the question comes in because there are already other companies that are producing these products. So with your explanation, we are supposed to look at probably areas where the big companies are not focusing.
Yeah.
Did I
So
get you?
ideally, yes, that's the idea. So if, for instance, I imagine an electric pressure cooker is similar to the ones we use for cooking at home.
Yes, like a
The
rice
ones we
cooker.
put on, rice cooker. But you'd be competing with the simpler version that we use on a charcoal stove, as an example.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so so the electric one has the advantage of course, it's clean energy. But now you need to probably focus on segments of customers who are sensitive to to the energy needs, such as, they don't want that in their homes. Yeah. The
Mm,
people living in high scale apartments and those places where it is, first of all, they can afford. I imagine the price range would be higher than the average, pressure cooker that people use on a charcoal stove. So identifying pockets of customers that have that unique need would set you up for a better success than trying to, scale across all market segments. So what data gives you is the advantage of, focus. You're focusing on the right people who have the unique need that you actually have an answer to. And I believe that would give you success against the big players.
okay, that makes a lot more sense. So when we talk about this data, are we going to look into the data of the customers or the information you're getting from the customers? Which kind of data do we exactly look at?
Okay, so because if I'm to think about this specific problem, or opportunity is to say, okay, for instance, in Kampala, where is the highest concentration of people living in studio apartments? Those who are using charcoal, for instance, would be an inconvenience. The ones who are living in high-rise apartments, studio apartments, which are, high-end. I'm just It's not like I have the data, but I'm saying that's what I would ask myself, and I would say, okay, maybe I should focus around maybe Ntinda, Nigeria, um, Kololo, and places like that in terms of the geographical zoning. But then also there's a question of affordability. So where those with averagely higher incomes but would also want to have a solution similar to that, and would either find the rice cooker maybe too expensive, but would find the electric, pressure cooker more affordable and serves the need. So it's really around examining the data around the demographics, the economic data around incomes and things like that. Using, for instance, UBOS data is available. Uganda Bureau of Statistics has some data on income. It has some data on production and expenditure and things like that. You could be able to pick something, but perhaps you would need also maybe expert help to try to do some good analysis for you and give you good recommendations. But ultimately, the idea is really to identify that pocket of customers that have that unique need and for which your solution can answer. So in general, that's what I would think about this specific issue.
Thank you very much, Mackinon. So the term big data flies around a lot in tech conversations. What does it mean, and what do we call data that isn't big data?
Okay, so we've already defined data to this point. So in the sense, big data is just a classification, or I could say it's a specific term to mean data that's high volume, high velocity, and high variety. So I'll explain that to say, okay, you have data, it comes in very huge volumes, we are talking terabytes. It comes at a very high speed, meaning you're either getting real-time streams of that data, and it's coming in multiple varieties. You're not getting the same data in the same structure. So I'll give an example to build the case. So MTN as a telco, if you look at us, every day we on this call, we are browsing or we are using data or your bundles. Your session that you're using, every single millisecond is generating a record. Those records are in millions in a day. You're also engaging your customers on SMS, on social media channels. Those feeds are coming and generating data on customers and customer interaction. Now, the format of a call record, that's voice, a call record, that's data, or a mobile money financial transaction are completely different. They come in different forms and formats. But also they are coming in milliseconds and in huge numbers. So that qualifies to be called big data because it's coming in huge volumes and it's coming at great speeds and in varying forms. So in short, big data is for something to qualify or for raw information to qualify as big data, it must conform to the three, we call them the 3 V's of volume, variety, and velocity. But otherwise, big data is not any different from data. It's just a classification. Like you would say, for someone to be called a female, they must have certain genomes and certain physical attributes and etc. But you can classify and say, and create a group within those females and say these females are particularly like this. So we call them a certain way. So I don't want to use an example that would take me into a gender conflict with you, Melanie, but I hope I have tried to explain it.
Yes, you have. What I've picked is that big data is all about the 3 V's, which is variety, volume, and velocity. So when you put it in a concept of tech conversations and big data files, what is it still also about the same thing, the 3 V's, or it goes into more details?
So really, the big data is not, in the tech conversations, of course, when they are talking about big data, my observation has been that it's just a disambiguation. It's not really that people are using it in the technical sense of what it means. But the conversation we are having, I'm giving you the actual meaning when it is used in the sense of the data environment or the business intelligence environment. When we say big data, it must qualify with the 3 V's as minimum. There are others that have been added. Some have talked about value because data has to have the 3 V's, but also must generate value because data in itself may not be useful until we can derive value out of it. So in the tech conversations, I know it is mentioned, but I cannot say for sure that I believe they say it in the strict sense. Sometimes it is just about the volume being too high. Sometimes it is just about data of varying, variety. People are using maybe data from social media, mining it, and adding it to maybe data they are picking off web pages and scraping web pages, and they're adding maybe internal data from surveys. So some may look at it in the strictness of variety. Then others may look at it in terms of velocity, in terms of streaming live, it's coming in on the fly, and you need to make decisions on the fly. So I can only speak to the technical meaning of it, but I believe it all revolves around those 3 V's for sure.
Okay, that makes more sense. So the next question. Many startups use business data every day, but don't realize it or record it. How can startups create meaningful data storage?
Okay, so this statement, I probably agree halfway. I don't agree fully. I don't think many startups actually are experiencing big data now that we've defined it and we know what it is. So the typical startup, like you've described yours, is not really using big data. In the sense, it's not collecting, it's not processing, neither is it storing big data. It's basically, in my view, but you can correct me, if for instance I am selling, okay, I'm manufacturing and selling this stove that you mentioned, or the cooker, the pressure cooker that you mentioned, that's electric. If I'm recording sales data, if I'm making sales every day, I'm recording data on sales. I'm recording data on customer feedback. If customers are complaining about the product, I'm collecting data on recommendations. But then there's also information about the product as you're manufacturing it, the inputs, the costs, the level of inventory at your dispatch center as you're giving out to the different teams to sell. So all this information is varied in the sense, but it's not really big data. So if the processes are well optimized and put in a certain way and organized in a certain ways to collect this data as the transactions or interactions happen, it can be organized in meaningful ways without really using a lot of complicated big data. For instance, Milan, if you had a Google Sheet where you, if you are the head of sales, whoever is making a sale is capturing the information, but it is automatically populating a report for
The
you for
Google
daily
Sheet.
sales. Yeah, on a simple tool such as Google Sheets, which is freely available, you can achieve visibility of your, performance every day without really doing anything complicated. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So I really hope you agree with me that in the sense you're not really processing any big data, but
Yes.
it's varied information coming from different points of interaction, either with your customers, with your stores teams, but all of it, if it's well organized, it can create meaningful insight without someone doing many fancy things that you hear about big data or big data storage.
So in my understanding, this is just information and not data. Is that right? Did I get it right?
until it is processed, organized to give anything meaningful, it is still data. But
Okay.
what I don't agree with is that it is big data.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Now that makes sense. Okay.
Okay.
So our next question is about MTN. MTN Uganda
Okay.
uses big data on a daily basis to make critical decisions. How can a startup do the same?
Okay.
Can I
So
interrupt
first,
a little bit?
yeah, no problem.
I wanted to because we had come to a conclusion that it's not yet data because it has not been processed.
No, it's not yet information. It is data, yes. So we agree, but it's not big data. So the only qualifier here is that while MTN actually processes and stores and uses big data, it's not the typical way a startup will operate or use data.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. So,
So
but
how
yes, the
best?
question still stands.
Mm,
While it may not be big data, still I've explained that a startup first of all needs to ensure that they have processes in place that collect that data as they are performing
yes.
the transactions or they are interacting with the customers, vendors, suppliers, and people like that, or even
Mm,
business stakeholders. So first, do you have the processes in place to collect data? Okay.
yes.
So because the understanding, I don't live in heaven, so I know for sure that the biggest challenge for many
Mm,
startups is really having manual and disjointed processes. So the guy who is doing sales will need to first come in office and write in a book for you to
mm,
know how many sales he made, how much inventory he has returned in the store. The guy who does inventory is using a book to record the people who have taken the electric cookers. So if all that information is simply put in processes, or sorry, the data processes are put in place, for instance, to say, can we have simple Google Forms where you input information, for instance, when you're taking inventory out of the warehouse or out of the storage. So automatically data on inventory is updated because you've picked something, it reduces the stock available and someone already has a report of how much stock is available. Then
mm,
when you make a sale in the field, you have a basic form. I'm using Google because it's the most affordable, most available, and device agnostic. You don't need to invest in anything. It is already there. So you have a
yes.
form for capturing that sales data, and it automatically populates a sales report, which the manager in office receives without having to do anything. So by
Mm,
just organizing the processes and putting some basic tools within the environment, you can achieve what MTN achieves using complicated and advanced tools because their data is so complex, advanced, and is not structured in simple ways that can be, uh, that can leverage simple tools. So for them, they need more investment to achieve what you can achieve in an easier and cheaper way. But by simply being organized around the processes and ensuring that you have that appetite to capture the data and use make something useful out of it.
okay. So assuming a startup is doing that,
Okay.
is it right to say that they can use that information to make critical decisions?
Yes, for sure. As an example, if you're capturing sales every day and they're automatically populating a report that has a visual showing trends of decline and growth, automatically you can know when your sales are declining and you can be
Mm,
able to make an informed decision and say, okay, for instance, our sales are declining in the particular area, because in your data, you actually put a field where someone selects where they have sold. So you can know new areas where you're making sales, areas that are declining in terms of performance, opportunities for areas where you've not even registered a single sale. So by doing basic things with the data, you're able to make critical decisions about your business.
Mm. But what
Mm.
happens when the data that is being given is not accurate? Like what I mean is, for example, if I went to the field and then I have to fill in the information because I know maybe when I go back to report, they'll not check the stock that I have, they'll not check the stock that I'm remaining with, and because I want to maybe seek favor, okay, that is not the right word to say, but seek favor in front of these people, and then I give in wrong information which gives in wrong data. So
Okay.
how do you navigate around these issues, because there is no guarantee that the information that is given is true, making the data false.
Okay, so unfortunately, data is also governed similar to other processes of the business. So today, for instance, you can't just trust someone to have the money for the business and keep it in their bag. So the
Mm,
same way, data needs to have processes. So for instance, who inputs that information must be someone who the business trusts, that has the integrity to capture the right data. But also, there could be controls in place. For instance, if you claim a sale, yeah, it means you must have banked money. So we can corroborate your sales information with the
mm,
bankings. Yeah.
mm,
So if I have, for
yes.
instance, the unit price of the pressure cooker is, for instance, 100,000. The
Mm,
bankings are 400,000, but you're claiming you made 10 sales. So where are the six?
mm,
So there are controls that are put in place for all processes in the business, and data management is one of those processes. So you need to
mm,
have controls in place to ensure that you can validate the data that is input by the different, data capture entities within your organization.
okay.
Okay.
Um, how can startups collect data without infringing on the privacy rights of their customers and partners?
Okay, so that's a good one, because it's a it's an emerging issue within the data conversation. So maybe just to make sure we are all understanding what we're talking about. So any information that's collected about the identity of a person is private information. So
Yes.
businesses must first of all understand what is private information, in the sense, or what is private data. So the guidelines and the way, or the framework for protecting customer data are clearly
Mm,
spelled out in the Data Protection and Privacy Act. It was, I think, enacted in 2019, and government issued subsequent guidelines in 2021. So every business needs to be, first of all, mindful that you have to seek consent of the data subject. So, for instance, I'm storing information about Melanie that concerns your
yes.
identity. I must tell you, first of all, that I'm going to collect that information and why I am collecting it.
Mm,
And in cases where I need to use it for a purpose beyond what we agreed, I must ask you to consent. So there are processes that you need to put in place if you're going to collect, process, and store private or personal data, and their
mm,
guidelines. I could share with you guys a link to the Data Protection and Privacy Act. I'm sure you all can quickly acquaint yourselves and look at it. But in short, in brief, it's around really either obtaining privacy around and making sure that the person whose data is actually being collected, stored, or processed, or even shared, has the full knowledge and understanding of what is being collected about them, and also gives consent in the event that you want to process it, share it, and store it. So that's, in my view, how you can, by acquainting yourself with the different laws and guidelines, you should be able to, as a business, ensure that you're complying, first of all, with the laws, but also the basic rule, even if you didn't know the law, is really looking at your moral, the moral question of whether what you're doing is right. And usually it will be correct all the time. If the question is it right? If you answer it and you say it is not, then probably it is illegal, even if you don't
What
check.
what if it is right to you?
So that's why we go to the law, because the law is clear. It does not have sides. So where you're not sure, you go to the law. But where you're really sure that your sense of judgment of right and wrong is clear, then, for instance, the information you collect on your customers might include their phone numbers. Yeah.
Yes.
So when you're collecting that phone number, it's because you want it in future. Should there be any need to communicate to them, you have their contact. Yeah. But if you get those numbers and you sell them to an advertising agency or company, and they start spamming them with messages, and unsolicited messages, it's a question now of, was it right when you did it? Uh, Under the law, it was not, but also morally, it was wrong. So yes, I know the small businesses may not have the big capacity to have legal, legal representation. So you want to make sure that you're complying with the laws, so that you do not get a situation where you have to
Yes.
face the law. Mm.
So how can we protect, let's say now a person like me? So you asked
Okay.
for some information like my phone number, and then you
Okay.
had to share it with some people, but I'm not in position to like fight for myself. Yes, I know what the law says. I know that okay, MTN has taken my number, it's using it for these purposes, but I cannot fight against it because maybe I do not have the resources, things like that.
Okay, so we are regulated. There's a data protection office. I don't know if you're aware. We are registered as processors and collectors of data. So in the event that we abuse or misuse personal information, they can revoke that license, in which case we will not be able to collect or process the data. So I can share after the call, I mean after the chat, about the contacts of the data protection office, which really now is fully constituted and regulates all activities around individual protection in as far as data privacy is
Mm,
concerned.
mm,
Yes.
okay. So an update from the chat. Mukalu Muhammad says thanks for promising that link. So I guess I should pin you on that so that you don't forget to send it.
Yeah, sure, I
Because
will.
they're more interested in research and data collection.
Okay.
Okay. So our next question is closely related. There's a lot of phone theft lately, and scammers seem to have a lot of access to customer mobile money data. They know customer
Okay.
names and as far as balances. How is MTN handling this? How can startups protect their data from malicious third parties?
Okay, so although I'm not not authorized to speak on behalf of MTN, but I can just use the publicly available information on this particular topic. So first of all, let's be clear. It's not like these scammers have breached into some data center of MTN and obtained your balance and etc. No, they haven't. They are simply using basic social engineering. They call you and confuse you to believe that you are in a threat or something of your account being locked or whatever, and they make you to dial codes which will inadvertently end up sending your money to some other person. So I don't know. Have you seen the Tom Ferrer campaign on TVs or heard about it on where they are giving, informative advice on avoiding the fraudsters. So they are
Yes.
not really sophisticated as the way you're giving them too much credit by believing that they've breached systems. No, they are simply using basic social engineering to confuse people. They've called me personally before. Imagine I am I am in MTN and they called me to. So if they were that
Mm.
sophisticated, they would know that I am staff and they would not call
Mm.
me. Yeah, so
Okay.
it's simply basic social engineering. It has been there all time, but it's really for people to be aware that first, their official contacts MTN will use when they are reaching out to you, but
Mm.
also that your PIN is secret. No one will ever need it for anything on MTN side.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what disturbs people? Like, okay, for a person like me who doesn't work in MTN, I would not know like to what extent these people have gone. So of course, if I'm called, I
Mm.
might believe, you know, something of that sort.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why MTN has embarked on the sensitization campaign to inform
Mm.
people about, and this is joint with UCC as well as Airtel. And it's an
Mm.
industry problem. It's not an MTN problem, really. To sensitize
Okay.
people about, the fraudsters and how they come up with their schemes, and to keep people
Mm.
informed so that the greatest security against these issues is for people to be armed with information.
Mm.
Yeah.
So for like now a startup that does
Okay.
not have money to
Okay.
come up with those adverts, sensitize people, how can they really be helped?
Okay. So it would really depend. I don't know in the context of a startup where they would have an issue like this. Um, if, for instance, someone is targeting your customers and robbing them of their incomes, and I don't know, it would have to look at the context, but assume, for instance, someone landed on the database of your customers. I don't know if you have
Mm.
one for your business,
Mm.
and called them, giving them a discounted offer on your prospective customers, and promise them a discount offer on gas or pressure cookers, and then they collect
Mm.
money and they don't refund,
Believe me. Mm.
or they don't deliver or something like that. So the idea is for you, first of all, to have the policies and frameworks we talked about. Say, for instance, how
Mm.
does one identify as staff of your company?
Okay.
Are you people, is your brand unique enough for people not to mistake it for some other person? One, two, how do your people identify themselves? How do you
Mm.
keep your customer contacts? Are you securely keeping them? Even if it doesn't have to be sophisticated, but
Mm.
password protected, where you're keeping that info, even if it's an Excel sheet. Yeah, is it password protected? Is it only available to a few people who you have confidence in, and things like that? So
Mm.
several ways, but the real solution really would depend on many other things and the context of the business you're doing. But in general, it's to
Mm.
have processes for your business to ensure that really customer data is protected, and only those
Yes.
authorized to access it can access it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So there's a question from the chat. How do we sell data to MTN?
Okay.
I don't
So,
know what that really means.
so there has been conversations around data monetization within the data ecosystems to say, for instance, I don't know what example the person in the chat would have, but the idea is, for instance, if you have data relating to an opportunity that MTN would be interested in, would you be selling it to them so that they can be able to, find value and monetize it? So that
Mm,
in the Ugandan context is still immature though, but I I hope in the future that there will be those, opportunities. But maybe the reverse is true. MTN has more data than you can provide us, I'm sure. So probably us
okay.
looking to sell to you, not you looking to sell to us in the current state. But maybe in future there will be,
Mm,
possibilities, or even now there might be, but this kind of area is still underdeveloped. There are few regulatory frameworks that are not yet developed to guide such a transaction. Because if, for instance, you're selling data which contains personal information, yeah,
mm,
what
yes.
would uh, what would be the guarantees that it is legal? So there are all those questions, but ultimately, I wouldn't say that it's something that's available at the moment, but maybe in future.
Mm, the person actually went ahead and gave an example. For example, if I did research about youth of Iganga, about factors that influence their thinking about telecommunication. So that is
Okay.
like
So
data. Mm,
okay. So okay, for me that is not data in the sense because it's not going to give us the unprocessed. A research is really information. He has processed
mm,
some data, collected some, for instance, data on questionnaires, and aggregated it in insightful ways to give meaning to it. So it's information. It's not data at all. It's information. So
mm,
there, through our research, we have frameworks for engaging people like him for reports. Yeah,
mm,
for reports that are, relating to particular data or sorry, particular customer groups or information. In his case, he's talking about the youth. So the agencies that handle our research, I don't know if you've heard of, for instance, Ipsos. Uh,
no.
okay, so all they do is research really and information. So they go perform such surveys, come up with insightful reports, which they avail to customers who subscribe to them. So he probably needs to engage such agencies to see how he can monetize his information, which is really a research paper in this context. It's not customer data. He has collected information. I hope he obtained consent and he followed the processes. But those agencies would then be able to find opportunities for monetizing it and give him
Mm,
the value that he's looking for.
okay. Survey reports. Thank you. Thank you for answering that. Mokalo, I hope everything is okay. He also commented, I
Okay.
always get IRB approvals.
Yes, I believe that's a
And
research board yeah, the body that governs research here in Uganda, yes. So a
okay.
partnership with a company like Ipsos could help him to monetize his, research actions or research activities or papers.
Okay. So I'll go on to our last question for that day.
Okay.
Um, so what inspires you to keep going?
That's an interesting one. Um, what really inspires me. So for me, it's really the drive to create impact around those who are in my social connections, my communities, and in my workplace. For me, that's what drives me. If I can't create impact, then I'm not really doing much. So that's what drives me,
Mm,
in short.
okay. I thought you're going to have another paragraph,
No.
but thank you for for making it simple and easy.
Thank you.
I don't know if we have any more questions before we say our goodbyes. Our lovely attendees, do you have any questions for Mr. Mackinon before he leaves the call? Thank you for sharing the links.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
maybe, yeah. So in the interest of time, since we are actually at the end of our session, I'm going to thank you so much for spending time with us. It has been a beautiful evening, learning from you, getting to know all those things personally. I've learned a lot because of the fact that I disclosed that I work with a startup. So it has been so helpful for me. And I'm going to go back and share with them and tell them, okay, so this is what you have been doing, but you can improve here and there and there, so that we do not compete with the big companies out there, but we have our own leveraging facts that can help us to get the best of our idea. Thank you very much once again. I'm actually going to ensure that we have policies that are more clear and
Okay.
continue to make our brand unique. Thank you very much once again. We are so humbled. And in case we have any questions, I will request Mr. Igumiri to share them with you so
Okay.
that maybe you answer them as we go on.
Okay. Thanks a lot for a very interactive session, Melanie, and for your interview. It's been very engaging. So we look forward. In case you have any questions further than what we've discussed, you can channel
Mm,
them through
okay.
Silver, and we should be able to answer them. Thank you again. Have a great evening.
You didn't ask me to be your friend, yet you said by the end of the conversation we would be
No, I think
friends.
that is already decided. I thought.
I don't think so, but yes,
Okay.
it is.
But yes,